Welcome to our channel. Imagine a city once thriving, now torn in two, its people divided, its future uncertain. Today, we're taking you on an unforgettable journey back to one of the most pivotal moments in modern history, the fall of the Berlin Wall. It was the 9th of November 1989. The world watched as something truly extraordinary happened. Berlin's iconic wall, which had separated families, friends, and entire nations for nearly 3 decades, came crashing down. That night, not only the concrete barrier, but also the fear and division that had plagued the world for years, crumbled. And in the midst of the chaos, something remarkable happened: hope. But how did we get here? How did a city, once a symbol of unity, become the stage for one of the greatest ideological divides in history? The story of the Berlin Wall isn't just about concrete and barbed wire. It's about human resilience, about those who dared to dream of freedom even when the world seemed bent on keeping them apart. In this video, we'll take you on a historical journey to understand the Berlin Wall's origins, why it was built, the people who lived with it, and the powerful forces that eventually brought it down. Along the way, we'll dive deep into the stories of courage, defiance, and incredible escape attempts that not only defined a generation, but changed the course of history forever. Before we dive into this incredible story, let me ask you, how do we break down the walls that divide us? This is not just a question for Berlin or Germany, but for every corner of the world today. As we explore the rise and fall of the Berlin Wall, we'll reflect on its powerful lessons and what it means for all of us living in a world still marked by division, whether it's ideological, cultural, or even digital. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on more incredible stories from history. And if you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and share, because the more people who hear these stories, the better our chances of building bridges instead of walls. So, let's go back in time to the heart of Europe, where the echoes of war still lingered, and the stage was set for one of the most dramatic shifts the world would ever witness. It's time to revisit the story of the Berlin Wall, how it came to be, how it divided millions of lives, and how, against all odds, it finally fell. On a cold November night in 1989, the air over Berlin was electric. Crowds pressed against a wall that had once seemed eternal, a scar of concrete, wire, and fear. The chants grew louder. "Tor auf! Open the gate!" Somewhere in the confusion, a border guard lifted a barrier. And just like that, history changed forever. People climbed the wall, hugged strangers, smashed pieces of concrete with bare hands. 1,000 flashbulbs exploded against the night sky. East and West, after 28 long years, finally touched. But to understand that night, that miracle of human hope, we must travel back through decades of division. Because the Berlin Wall didn't fall in a single night. It began in the ashes of war. The Second World War had left Europe in ruins, places its cities reduced to dust, its people broken, its ideals shattered. Berlin, once the proud capital of Germany, was now a carcass split among the victors. The Allies, comprising the United States, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, had won the war together. But peace, as the world would learn, would divide them. 4 sectors, 1 city. Initially, Berliners continued to cross freely between zones. They traded, worked, and visited family. Yet behind the diplomatic smiles, a deeper struggle was unfolding. A war not of guns, but of ideas. Capitalism versus communism. Freedom versus control. Each side claimed to hold the key to humanity's future. And Berlin, small, fragile, surrounded by Soviet territory, became the stage on which the Cold War would first show its teeth. In 1946, Winston Churchill warned the world. From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. That curtain wasn't just metaphorical. It was checkpoints, fences, armed patrols, and soon a wall. But back then, in the late 1940 seconds, nobody could imagine that such a wall would cut through the heart of a city. At first, Berliners believed cooperation was still possible. Yet as the Soviet Union tightened its grip on Eastern Europe, the Western Allies merged their zones into what would become West Germany. The Soviets responded by creating the East German state, the German Democratic Republic. 2 Germanys, 2 systems, 2 destinies. The tension snapped in 1948 when the Soviets blockaded West Berlin, cutting off food and supplies. But the Western Allies didn't back down. They launched one of the greatest humanitarian efforts in modern history, the Berlin Airlift. For nearly a year, Allied planes flew over the blockade, delivering coal, food, and medicine. Every 30 seconds, a plane landed at Tempelhof Airport. The people of Berlin survived because strangers in the sky refused to let them starve. The blockade failed, but the divide had hardened. East and West were now enemies, staring at each other across barbed wire and propaganda posters. By the 1950 seconds, the contrast between the 2 Berlins became impossible to ignore. In the West, skyscrapers rose, jazz played in cafes, and neon lights colored the nights. In the East, ration cards, gray uniforms, and the watchful eyes of the Stasi, the secret police. People didn't just lose freedom, they lost trust. Neighbors spied on neighbors. Families whispered in their own kitchens. And so, they fled. Every day, hundreds crossed into West Berlin. Doctors, engineers, students, workers. By 1961, nearly 3 million East Germans had escaped through Berlin. It was the biggest exodus in modern Europe. For East Germany's leaders, this was a crisis. If everyone who could leave did leave, their socialist dream would collapse. And so, they made a fateful decision. At dawn on the 13th of August, 1961, East Berliners awoke to find soldiers rolling out barbed wire through the middle of their streets. Concrete followed. The city, once whole, was split in 2. That was the birth of the Berlin Wall. For the next 28 years, this wall would define not only Berlin, but the entire world. It would stand as the ultimate symbol of division, of fear frozen into architecture. But it was never just about politics. It was about people. The mother who watched her son grow up across the wall and could never touch his hand again. The young man who risked everything to cross, and was shot in no man's land. The guard who looked west every night, wondering if freedom was worth betrayal. For nearly 3 decades, this concrete serpent cut through the heart of a city and through the soul of a generation. Yet history has a strange rhythm. Even the tallest walls, the strongest regimes, eventually crumble, not under bombs, but under the weight of truth and time. The seeds of the wall's destruction were planted by those who refused to stop believing. Writers, students, musicians, priests, people who whispered of freedom when it was dangerous even to dream it. By the 1,980 seconds, those whispers would become chants. Those chants would become crowds, and those crowds would one day shake the very foundation of the Soviet Empire. The night the wall fell wasn't just about Germany. It was about the end of an era, the death of the Cold War's most visible wound. It was a moment when millions of people felt history turn in real time. As chunks of the wall fell to the ground, people filled their pockets with broken pieces of history, gray concrete dust on their fingers, tears in their eyes, disbelief in their voices. It wasn't only the wall that crumbled that night. It was fear. It was silent. It was the idea that the world must always be divided. And that is where our story begins, not with a hammer, but with hope. And in May 1945, the guns of Europe fell silent. After 6 years of devastation, the Second World War was finally over. Berlin, once the shining capital of the Third Reich, now lay in ruins. A city once home to 4 million people had become a wasteland of ash and rubble. Its streets were cratered, its monuments scorched, its citizens starved and broken. From above, Berlin looked like a ghost city, half buried under smoke and dust. The victors arrived soon after. The Americans from the west, the British from the north, the French from the south, and the Soviets from the east. They marched not just into a city, but into history, because Berlin, more than any other place, would decide the future of Europe. As the occupying forces moved in, their presence marked the beginning of a new chapter for Berlin and its people. The city became a symbol of both division and hope. While the scars of war were evident in every corner, there was also a palpable sense of determination to rebuild and heal. Amidst the debris, Berliners began the arduous task of reconstructing their lives. Neighbors came together, forming communities out of necessity and solidarity. The air was filled with the clatter of bricks being stacked and the hum of makeshift machinery, as citizens worked tirelessly to restore some semblance of normalcy. In this period of reconstruction, Berlin became a microcosm of the broader political tensions that were unfolding across the globe. The city was divided into sectors, each controlled by one of the Allied powers, and this division set the stage for the Cold War. Yet, even as ideological rifts deepened, Berliners found ways to connect and cooperate, their resilience shining through the gloom. The city's iconic landmarks, though battered and broken, stood as reminders of its rich history and indomitable spirit. The Brandenburg Gate, with its imposing columns, became a silent witness to the changes sweeping through the heart of Europe. As the world watched, Berliners navigated the complexities of their new reality, their stories woven into the larger tapestry of post-war recovery. In the years that followed, Berlin would emerge from the shadows, a testament to the enduring power of hope and human ingenuity. Its streets, once filled with echoes of conflict, would come alive again with the sounds of laughter, music, and the enduring rhythm of life. The Allies agreed that Germany must never again become a threat to world peace. At the Potsdam Conference in the summer of 1945, they divided the defeated nation into 4 occupation zones, each governed by one of the Allied powers. Berlin, though deep inside the Soviet zone, would also be divided into 4 parts. On paper, this seemed temporary, a practical arrangement until Germany could rebuild. In reality, it was the seed of a new conflict. The United States, Britain, and France envisioned a democratic, capitalist Germany, the principles of freedom and market economy. The Soviet Union, under Joseph Stalin, sought to secure its borders through control and ideology. He had lost over 20 million Soviet citizens in the war. To him, Eastern Europe was a protective wall, not of stone, but of obedience. Soon, Berlin became the symbolic heart of this ideological chessboard. Within a single city, 2 worlds existed side by side, and the cracks between them widened every day. The contrast was stark and palpable. In the western sectors, the air buzzed with a sense of renewal and hope as bustling markets, vibrant cultural scenes, and the promise of a brighter future took root. Streets were lined with cafes brimful of chatter. Theaters showcased the latest plays, and optimism seemed to hang in the air like a sweet perfume. In the Soviet-controlled East, however, the atmosphere was markedly different. The push for industrialization and collectivism cast a shadow as the state exerted its influence over every aspect of life. Propaganda posters adorned the walls, extolling the virtues of communism and the workers' paradise, while the people faced shortages and restrictions in their daily lives. As the months passed, tensions escalated. Checkpoints and barriers became part of the landscape, a daily reminder of the divide that was as much psychological as it was physical. Families and friends were separated, and the flow of information became a trickle as each side sought to assert its dominance and narrative. The world watched as Berlin became a microcosm of the Cold War itself, a city where the ideologies of East and West collided in a delicate dance of diplomacy and defiance. It was here, in this divided metropolis, that the first tremors of the Iron Curtain were felt, foreshadowing a conflict that would simmer for decades, shaping the course of history in ways no one could have foreseen. An Iron Curtain has descended across the continent. When Winston Churchill spoke those words in March 1946, he gave a name to the invisible line splitting Europe. In the East, Soviet control, one-party rule, collectivization, censorship. In the West, democracy, capitalism, and growing prosperity. Berlin, trapped inside the Soviet zone but half controlled by the West, became a pressure point, a city under siege by ideology. At first, Berliners could still travel freely between sectors. They crossed from east to west for work, groceries, or simply to breathe a little easier. But the mood was changing. Soviet troops watched every crossing. Propaganda posters warned of capitalist corruption. And the Western powers grew equally suspicious of Moscow's intentions. Tensions simmered beneath the surface, like a pot on the verge of boiling over. The sense of freedom that once characterized Berlin's bustling streets began to feel like a distant memory, replaced by an air of uncertainty and unease. Families found themselves divided, friendships strained by the invisible yet palpable boundary that snaked through the heart of the city. As the Cold War intensified, so did the restrictions. The once open pathways between East and West Berlin slowly narrowed, and the specter of a divided city loomed ever larger. In August 1961, the situation reached a dramatic climax with the construction of the Berlin Wall. Overnight, concrete barriers and barbed wire tore through neighborhoods, severing connections and solidifying the physical manifestation of the Iron Curtain that Churchill had foreseen. Yet, in the face of adversity, the spirit of the Berliners refused to be crushed. Ingenious escape attempts became legendary. From tunnels dug beneath the wall to daring leaps over it, art and music flourished as acts of resistance, with graffiti transforming the wall into a canvas of defiance and hope. People on both sides found ways to communicate, whispering words of solidarity and dreams of reunification. Through it all, Berlin remained a symbol of resilience and the unyielding human desire for freedom. The city stood as a poignant reminder that, even in the darkest of times, the light of hope can never be fully extinguished. The Cold War, though no bullets had been fired, had begun. In 1948, tension boiled over. The Western Allies decided to introduce a new currency, the Deutsche Mark and Cents, to help stabilize the economy in their zones. The Soviets saw it as an act of defiance. In June, they struck back. All roads, railways, and canals leading to West Berlin were suddenly closed. Electricity was cut. 2 million civilians were trapped, isolated 160 kilometers inside Soviet-controlled East Germany. Stalin's message was clear. If you want Berlin, come and take it. But instead of sending tanks, the West sent planes. Every 30 seconds, Allied aircraft descended onto Tempelhof, Gatow, and Tegel airfields, delivering coal, flour, medicine, and hope. Over 277,000 flights in less than a year, an extraordinary display of resolve. Berliners called it the Luftbrücke, the air bridge. Children waved at planes, nicknaming the pilots raisin bombers because they dropped chocolate from the sky. By spring 1949, Stalin realized the blockade had failed. He lifted it quietly, humiliated, but something had changed forever. Two Germanys were about to be born. This event was not only a strategic victory for the Western forces, but also a symbol of resilience and solidarity. Berlin, a divided city, became an emblem of the ongoing Cold War between the two superpowers. The people of Berlin, despite living in harsh conditions, maintained their spirit, and the support from the air bolstered their faith in the future. Those difficult days left indelible memories of courage and unity in the hearts of the people. From this event, the lesson on the importance of cooperation and determination became clearer than ever. Two Germanys were formed, each following its own path, but Berlin stood firm, serving as a bridge between East and West, between past and future. On the 23rd of May 1949, the Federal Republic of Germany, FRG, West Germany, was officially founded with Bonn as its capital. It was democratic, Western-aligned, and economically ambitious. In response, on the 7th of October 1949, the Soviets established the German Democratic Republic, GDR, East Germany, a socialist state under strict communist rule. Its capital, East Berlin. Now, there were two flags, two governments, two futures, separated by ideology, but sharing one tortured history. West Germany, aided by the Marshall Plan, began to rebuild rapidly. Shops filled with goods, factories reopened, and cars rolled off assembly lines. The Wirtschaftswunder, the economic miracle, turned the FRG into one of Europe's strongest economies within a decade. East Germany told a different story. Despite Soviet aid and central planning, shortages were constant. Citizens waited in line for basic goods. The Stasi, the secret police, grew omnipresent, recording whispers, reading mail, breaking trust. And so, the flow of refugees began, as countless East Germans sought freedom and opportunity in the West. The allure of prosperity and personal liberty was irresistible, and thousands risked everything to cross the heavily guarded border. The Berlin Wall, erected in 1961, became the stark symbol of this division. It was a physical and ideological barrier, a concrete manifestation of the Cold War tensions that gripped the world. Families were torn apart, and the dreams of many were dashed against its formidable presence. Yet, amid the harsh realities of separation, stories of courage and ingenuity emerged. People devised daring plans to escape, from tunneling under the wall to flying over it in homemade hot air balloons. Each successful escape was a testament to the unyielding spirit of those who longed for freedom. In West Germany, the narrative was one of growth and integration. As the nation prospered, it became a beacon of democracy and a crucial player in the formation of the European Union. The FRG welcomed immigrants and refugees, embracing diversity and fostering a culture of innovation and resilience. The contrast between the two Germanys was stark, yet there remained an enduring hope for reunification. The wall, though imposing, could not suppress the deep-seated desire for unity and peace. As the decades passed, the winds of change began to blow. The late 1982 brought a wave of reform across Eastern Europe, and the people of East Germany grew bolder in their demands for freedom. The world watched with bated breath as the tide of history shifted. And then, on the 9th of November 1989, the unimaginable happened. The Berlin Wall fell, not with a bang, but with a collective cry for liberty. East and West Germans embraced, their tears of joy washing away years of division. The reunification of Germany on the 3rd of October 1990 marked the beginning of a new chapter. It was a testament to resilience and the power of hope, a reminder that even the deepest divides can be bridged when people dare to dream of a better future together. Between 1949 and 1961, more than 2.7 million East Germans escaped to the West. Most did so through Berlin, the one place where the Iron Curtain remained porous. They walked through subway tunnels, rode trams that crossed sectors, or simply strolled from one side of the street to the other. For East Germany, this was catastrophic. Doctors, engineers, teachers, the very people needed to build socialism, were leaving. By 1961, 1 in 5 East Germans under 25 had fled. Each departure was an act of defiance, and each one left the regime more desperate. Propaganda blamed Western lies. But even within the East, people knew the truth. The dream of socialism was fading. The GDR's leader, Walter Ulbricht, grew increasingly anxious. He begged Moscow for permission to close the border, to seal the wound. At first, Nikita Khrushchev, the Soviet premier, hesitated. He didn't want a direct confrontation with the West. But as the refugee crisis worsened, his patience ran out. By summer 1961, the decision was made. In the early hours of the 13th of August, 1961, East German soldiers rolled out barbed wire and began erecting a concrete wall that would come to symbolize the division of not just a city, but a world. The Berlin Wall was born, stretching across neighborhoods, severing streets, and splitting families. It was a desperate measure, a physical manifestation of the ideological divide that had grown since the end of World War II. For those in the East, the wall was an oppressive barrier. For those in the West, it became a powerful symbol of the Cold War, a stark reminder of the struggle between freedom and repression. Despite the danger, many continued to risk their lives to escape. Ingenious and daring attempts were made, from tunneling under the wall to flying over it in hot air balloons. The Berlin Wall stood for nearly 3 decades, a grim reminder of the lengths to which regimes would go to maintain control. But even walls cannot hold back the tide of history forever. As the world watched, the barriers began to crumble, both physically and ideologically. The wall that once divided a city and a world became a canvas for hope and unity. And in November 1989, it finally fell, marking the beginning of a new era. It began in silence. In the early hours of the 13th of August, 1961, thousands of East German soldiers and construction workers moved through Berlin's streets. They carried barbed wire, wooden posts, and concrete slabs. Berliners woke to find roads closed, train lines severed, and soldiers blocking crossings. Families stood on opposite sidewalks, staring at each other in disbelief. Mothers screamed to children trapped on the other side. One man jumped from a window to reach the West. He broke both legs but smiled through the pain, knowing he was free. By sunrise, the city was split in two. What began as wire quickly hardened into concrete. Guard towers rose. A death strip was cleared. Raked sand, floodlights, tripwires, and landmines. The Berlin Wall was not built to keep enemies out. It was built to keep citizens in. As the days turned into weeks, the wall became a grim symbol of division. Families and friends found themselves separated not just by physical barriers, but by an ideological chasm. The once bustling city of Berlin now echoed with the poignant silence of separation. Despite the oppressive atmosphere, the human spirit proved resilient. Secret tunnels were dug under the wall, and courageous individuals devised ingenious methods to escape to the West. Some used hot air balloons, others hid in modified cars, while a few brave souls swam across the rivers. Each successful escape was a beacon of hope, a testament to the enduring desire for freedom. Art and music also became powerful forms of resistance. Artists painted vibrant murals on the wall's western side, transforming it into a canvas of protest and expression. Musicians composed songs that resonated with the longing for unity and peace. The wall, though meant to divide, inadvertently united people in their shared yearning for a future without barriers. Years passed, and the world began to change. The whispers of reform grew louder, and the winds of change swept through Eastern Europe. On the 9th of November, 1989, the unthinkable happened. Crowds gathered at the wall, and with each swing of the hammer, the concrete crumbled, revealing a path to reconciliation. The fall of the Berlin Wall marked the dawn of a new era, a powerful reminder that no wall is insurmountable when fueled by the collective will for freedom and unity. The city, once split, began to heal, and Berliners embraced the promise of a shared future. The shock was immediate. West Berlin's mayor, Willy Brandt, called it a prison for 17 million people. American President John F. Kennedy, newly elected, condemned the wall but stopped short of military action. The United States would protect West Berlin, but not invade East Germany. The message to Moscow was clear: we will not start World War III. Behind the scenes, both sides understood the same grim truth. The wall, for all its cruelty, prevented an even greater disaster. It froze the conflict. It made the Cold War visible, but stable. In that sense, the Berlin Wall became both tragedy and peacekeeper, a cruel equilibrium. As the years passed, the wall grew to symbolize the broader ideological divide between East and West. It was a physical manifestation of the Iron Curtain, a barrier not just of concrete and barbed wire, but of beliefs and governance. Families were torn apart, and escape attempts were perilous and often deadly, serving as stark reminders of the human cost of geopolitical standoffs. Yet, even in its oppressive shadow, life continued. Artists and activists on both sides used the wall as a canvas, transforming it into a powerful statement of resistance, hope, and the yearning for unity. It became a backdrop for stories of courage and defiance, where ordinary people sought extraordinary ways to assert their freedom. In the West, the wall sparked debates and discussions about the nature of freedom, democracy, and the responsibilities of nations. It was a constant reminder of the fragility of peace and the vigilance required to maintain it. For nearly 3 decades, the wall stood as a testament to division and endurance. But as the political climate began to shift in the late 1980 seconds, whispers of change grew louder. The world watched as cracks appeared not just in the concrete, but in the ideologies that had kept the wall upright for so long. Finally, on the 9th of November 1989, the wall fell. It crumbled not just under the force of hammers and chisels, but under the weight of a collective desire for change and reconciliation. The scenes of celebration and unity that followed were broadcast worldwide, capturing the imagination and hope of millions. The fall of the Berlin Wall marked the beginning of the end of the Cold War. It was a moment of triumph for those who had long dreamed of freedom and a new chapter of possibility for a world that had been divided for too long. Over the next few years, the wall grew taller, thicker, and deadlier. Families torn apart tried to communicate through letters that never arrived. Grandparents watched grandchildren grow only through binoculars from viewing platforms. More than 5,000 people attempted to escape over or under the wall. At least 140 were killed, shot, electrocuted, drowned, or broken on the barbed wire. One of them was Peter Fechter, and one 8-year-old bricklayer. In August 1962, he tried to climb the wall with his friend. His friend made it. Peter didn't. Shot in the back, he lay bleeding in the death strip for nearly an hour as soldiers and guards stared, doing nothing. The world saw the images, and outrage spread like wildfire. Peter Fechter became a symbol of youth, of desperation, of humanity trapped between ideologies. The tragedy of his death resonated deeply, sparking international condemnation and calls for change. Yet, for those who lived in the shadow of the wall, it was a grim reminder of the daily peril and oppression they faced. Communities remained divided, and the emotional toll was immense. Families were left to grieve loved ones they could not mourn properly. Friends became memories, frozen in time by an insurmountable barrier. However, amidst the darkness, stories of resilience and courage emerged. Tales of daring escapes, of tunnels dug in the dead of night, and of ingenious contraptions designed to ferry people to freedom became legends of hope and defiance. These narratives served as a testament to the human spirit's unyielding desire for connection and liberty. As the years passed, the wall became not just a physical structure, but a powerful symbol of separation and the human cost of political division. It stood as a stark reminder of the need for empathy, understanding, and the enduring quest for a world united in peace. As the 1,960 seconds unfolded, Berlin settled into its divided reality. On one side, Coca-Cola, freedom, rock and roll. On the other hand, parades, red flags, and silence. Children grew up never seeing the other half of their own city. Maps in East German schools simply erased West Berlin. For the younger generation, the wall wasn't a wound. It was normal life. But beneath the surface, resentment grew. Every escape attempt, every funeral, every whisper of the West cracked the facade of the regime just a little more. The Berlin Wall had succeeded in stopping people from leaving, but it could not stop the truth from seeping through radio waves, smuggled books, and the simple human desire to be free. And so, Berlin became the ultimate paradox of the Cold War, the place where the world was most divided, yet where the dream of unity burned the brightest. The wall stood firm, gray, and silent. But history was already at work behind it, in whispers, in secret meetings, in songs sung softly in East German churches, because every wall, no matter how high, carries within it the story of its own destruction. Tall and solid walls seemed unshakable, but the human spirit could not be confined forever. Day by day, hour by hour, small yet steadfast rays of hope from within Berlin quietly crept through every crack of control. Rock and roll music from the West carried messages of freedom and stories about life beyond the wall. were passed on through secret gatherings. In small cafes and dimly lit apartments, whispered conversations about a different future and a world without division took place. Children grew up yearning to see the sun shine on both halves of their city, to run freely on streets without borders. They dreamed of a day when Berlin would no longer be a symbol of confrontation but a bridge of peace and unity. Silent tears were shed in remembrance of lost loved ones, and prayers in the dark were not just expressions of pain, but seeds of faith. History has shown that no wall is strong enough to suppress the human desire for freedom. In the early morning hours of August 13th, 1961, Berlin changed forever. While most of the city still slept, East German soldiers and police began unrolling barbed wire along the border that separated the Soviet and Western sectors. Streets were closed, train lines were cut. People awoke to find that they were now trapped behind an invisible line that had suddenly become all too real. Within days, concrete replaced wire. Guard towers began to rise. Families that once lived across the same street could no longer reach one another. The heart of Germany was now split by a scar of concrete and fear, the Berlin Wall. Life for the people of Berlin suddenly turned upside down. Stories of families being split apart, love stories ending abruptly, and dreams buried between two opposing worlds became an inseparable part of the city's history. On the western side, Berlin developed into a symbol of freedom where art and culture flourished. Cafes, theaters, and art galleries sprang up, becoming gathering places for creative and freedom-loving souls. Meanwhile, on the eastern side, life was under strict surveillance, with stringent restrictions and tight government control. The wall not only divided a city but also deepened the rift between two ideologies. Yet, even in the darkness of oppression, hope flickered. The resilient Berliners continuously sought ways to overcome the wall, despite the dangers, driven by a desire for a world without boundaries. In the late 1970s, signs of change began to emerge. Resistance movements in East Berlin grew stronger, and the desire for reunification gradually spread everywhere. The wall, no matter how solid, could not stop the will of a people yearning for freedom and unity. The Berlin Wall was not built to protect East Germany from invasion, as official propaganda claimed. It was built to stop people from leaving. From 1949 to 1961, roughly 2.7 million East Germans had fled to the west, many through Berlin, which remained an open border inside the Soviet zone. Skilled workers, engineers, doctors, teachers, the very people East Germany needed most, were disappearing in droves. The socialist government, led by Walter Ulbricht, could not survive such losses. The solution was drastic but simple: seal the escape route. The Soviet Union, under Nikita Khrushchev, gave reluctant approval, and so, in the middle of the night, East Berlin became a prison. For the West, it was a moral outrage, but also a political paradox. U.S. President John F. Kennedy, while condemning the wall publicly, also saw it as a stabilizing measure. The wall, terrible as it was, reduced the chance of open war over Berlin. As Kennedy reportedly said, "A wall is a hell of a lot better than a war." Despite the immediate outcry, The Berlin Wall quickly became a defining symbol of the Cold War, embodying the stark division between East and West, communism and capitalism. It was more than just a physical barrier, it was a manifestation of the ideological clash that had gripped the world. For those in East Germany, the wall was a daily reminder of their restricted freedom. Families were torn apart, communities divided, and lives irrevocably altered. Yet, even amidst the oppression, the human spirit remained resilient. Ingenious escape attempts became legendary, from tunnels dug under the wall to daring flights over it in hot air balloons. Art, too, found its voice on the western side of the wall, where graffiti and murals transformed the concrete edifice into a canvas of defiance and hope. Each stroke of paint was a silent protest, a cry for unity and freedom. For nearly 3 decades, the wall stood, until the winds of change began to blow across Eastern Europe. The fall of the wall in 1989 was a moment of jubilation, a testament to the power of persistence and the yearning for freedom. It marked not only the reunification of a city and a nation, but also the end of an era defined by division. Today, remnants of the wall serve as a poignant reminder of the past, urging future generations to remember the lessons learned and to strive for a world where walls are not needed. By the mid-1960s, the wall had evolved into a deadly system of control. It wasn't just a single wall, but a series of barriers, 2 parallel walls, separated by a death strip filled with raked sand, tripwires, floodlights, and armed guards authorized to shoot to kill. Over time, this structure grew into a 96-mile fortress surrounding all of West Berlin. Every street, bridge, and railway line that once connected the city was severed. Families were divided overnight. Letters were censored. Phone calls were monitored or cut off completely. East Germans were forbidden to approach within 100 meters of the barrier. The East German government justified it as the anti-fascist protective rampart, claiming it was necessary to keep out Western spies and saboteurs. But everyone knew the truth. It was built to keep people in, not to keep enemies out. The wall became a powerful symbol of the Cold War, representing not only the physical divide between East and West, but also the psychological chasm that separated ideologies, families, and friends. It was a constant reminder of the oppressive regime that sought to control every aspect of life on the eastern side. The mere presence of the wall instilled fear and despair, yet it also sparked a deep-seated yearning for freedom and unity. Despite the dangers, countless East Germans risked everything to escape to the West. Ingenious methods were employed. Tunnels dug beneath the wall, hot air balloons crafted from everyday materials, and even daring attempts to crash vehicles through barriers. Each successful escape was a testament to the human spirit's resilience and determination to overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Cultural and artistic expressions flourished in response to the wall's oppressive presence. Musicians, writers, and artists from both sides of the divide used their crafts to protest, to mourn, and to dream of a future without barriers. Their work served as a beacon of hope and a rallying cry for change. As the years passed, international pressure and the winds of change began to erode the wall's symbolic and physical structure. The world watched in awe on the 9th of November 1989, when the wall fell, and with it, the division that had haunted Berlin for nearly 3 decades. The dismantling of the wall marked not only the reunification of a city, but also the triumph of hope, unity, and the indomitable human spirit. Despite the danger, thousands still tried to flee. Some dug tunnels beneath the wall, intricate networks stretching hundreds of meters, often built by West Berlin students, risking their own lives to rescue strangers. Others used creative and daring methods, stealing construction vehicles, swimming across canals, hiding in car trunks, or even flying over the barrier in homemade hot air balloons. But the cost was horrific. Hundreds were shot while trying to cross. Many more were captured and imprisoned. The first victim, Ida Siekmann, died in August 1960, one after jumping from her apartment window into the West. The most infamous case came in 1962, when Peter Fechter, and one 8-year-old bricklayer, was gunned down and left to bleed to death in the death strip, within view of Western witnesses who could do nothing. These deaths became symbols of the wall's brutality. Western media broadcast them around the world, exposing the human cost of the Cold War divide. The stories of those who tried and failed became powerful reminders of the determination and desperation that defined the era. Families were torn apart, friends separated, and lives irrevocably changed by a line drawn through the heart of a city. Yet, amidst the tragedies, tales of successful escapes provided glimmers of hope. They were celebrated as victories of the human spirit over oppression, and each successful escapee carried with them the dreams and aspirations of those who remained trapped. Communities in West Berlin often rallied together to support new arrivals, offering shelter and assistance as they began to rebuild their lives in freedom. These acts of kindness highlighted the resilience and solidarity of people living in a divided city. As years passed, the wall became more than just a physical barrier. It was a symbol of ideological conflict, a daily reminder of the struggle for freedom and unity. Artistic expressions, from graffiti to poetry, flourished on its western side, turning the wall into a canvas for the voices that could not be silenced. And though it stood imposingly for nearly 3 decades, the wall's eventual fall in 1989 signified not only the end of physical division, but also a new beginning for a reunified Germany and a hopeful future for Europe. Berlin, by the late 1960s, became a microcosm of the global struggle between capitalism and communism. In West Berlin, despite being an island inside East Germany, life thrived. The city was heavily subsidized by the West German government and supported by the United States. Students, artists, and intellectuals flocked there, attracted by its unique mix of freedom, culture, and defiance. It became a hub of counterculture and protest movements, from anti-Vietnam demonstrations to rock music scenes and avant-garde art. Meanwhile, in East Berlin, life was defined by control and conformity. The Stasi, East Germany's secret police, grew into one of the most pervasive surveillance networks in history. By the 1972, there was roughly one informant for every 60 citizens. People lived in constant fear that a friend, neighbor, or even spouse could be reporting on them. For the East, it was both a shield and a cage, protecting the regime from collapse, but also preventing it from evolving. In this atmosphere of tension and cultural exchange, creativity found unique ways to flourish. Artists and writers on both sides used their crafts to express dissent and hope, often embedding subtle messages that resonated deeply with those who understood their true meanings. Smuggled magazines, cassette tapes, and American music circulated secretly among East German youth. In private, many admired Western fashion and freedom, even if they dared not say it aloud. The wall, ironically, became both a physical and psychological mirror, reflecting the weaknesses of each system. For the West, it was a moral rallying point, a constant reminder of the human cost of dictatorship. During these years, both sides fought an unrelenting battle for hearts and minds. The West broadcast television and radio into the East, exposing East Germans to Western news, advertisements, and culture. East German authorities jammed signals, confiscated antennas, and launched their own propaganda, depicting the West as a place of crime, exploitation, and moral decay. Yet, the allure of Western life proved irresistible. The era highlighted the power of diplomacy and dialogue over confrontation, laying the groundwork for future negotiations and, eventually, the dramatic changes that would unfold in the late 20th century. As the 1,970 seconds gave way to a new decade, the seeds planted by détente began to bear fruit, setting the stage for the transformative events that would ultimately reshape the global order. Critics argued that détente provided a false sense of security, allowing authoritarian regimes to strengthen their grip, as evident in the continued suppression within Eastern Bloc countries. Despite these concerns, the politics of normalization brought a glimmer of hope to a world weary of division. Nixon's historic visit to China in 1972 opened doors that had been closed for decades, paving the way for improved Sino-American relations. This shift not only altered the geopolitical landscape, but also demonstrated the potential of diplomacy as a tool for peace. Yet, the era of détente was not without its challenges. Skeptics on both sides questioned the sincerity of these efforts, fearing they might mask deeper strategic maneuvers. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the United States sought its own path toward easing Cold War tensions. President Richard Nixon and his Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, embarked on a series of strategic negotiations, including the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, SALT, with the Soviet Union. These talks aimed to curb the arms race and establish a framework for nuclear disarmament, marking a significant step toward mutual understanding. In Asia, diplomatic breakthroughs were also underway. For the first time, divided families were allowed to visit each other, albeit under strict supervision. East Germany also gained diplomatic recognition from many Western nations, solidifying its status as a legitimate state, at least on paper. But even as relations thawed on the surface, the wall remained. Concrete was repaired, watchtowers modernized, security tightened. The GDR allowed symbolic gestures of openness, end quote, but its foundation still relied on repression. His goal was simple yet revolutionary: to normalize relations with the East through dialogue rather than hostility. In 1970, Brandt visited East Germany and even knelt at the Warsaw Ghetto Memorial, a gesture that shocked many but symbolized a new era of reconciliation. This policy led to a series of treaties recognizing existing borders, easing travel restrictions, and improving communication between East and West Germany. In the broader context of the Cold War, Berlin exemplified the possibility of coexistence amidst discord, a testament to the resilience of its people and the enduring hope for unity and peace. By the 1972nd, a new phase began. After decades of confrontation, both East and West sought to reduce tensions, a policy known as détente. In West Germany, Chancellor Willy Brandt pursued a groundbreaking initiative called Ostpolitik, the Eastern Policy. Artists, musicians, and intellectuals from both East and West found inspiration in the city's unique atmosphere. In the shadow of the wall, creativity flourished, and a vibrant counterculture emerged, challenging the status quo and sowing seeds of change that would eventually lead to the wall's fall in 1989. Leaders from both superpowers recognized the importance of maintaining a precarious balance. Through back-channel communications and carefully negotiated agreements, they worked to prevent the Cold War from turning hot. The Berlin Wall, while a physical barrier, also served as a somber reminder of the division that defined the era. Yet, amidst the tension, Berlin thrived as a cultural hub. In the end, both sides pulled back. But the message was clear. Berlin could, at any moment, become the spark that destroyed civilization. The city thus encapsulated the ideological struggle between communism and democracy, a microcosm of the larger global tensions. Despite the frequent standoffs and the ever-present specter of conflict, Berlin also became a place where diplomacy and dialogue cautiously unfolded. It was also a constant reminder of the West's presence deep inside the communist bloc, something Moscow never fully accepted. Crises flared periodically. The most dangerous came in October 1961 at Checkpoint Charlie, when American and Soviet tanks faced each other across the border, guns loaded, engines idling. For 16 tense hours, the world held its breath, fearing that a single gunshot could ignite World War III. Throughout the 1,960 seconds and 1,970 seconds, Berlin remained the most sensitive flashpoint of the Cold War. Every move in the city carried global implications. For the United States, West Berlin was a symbol proof that democracy could survive under siege. American troops remained stationed there, supported by the famous Berlin Brigade. For the Soviet Union and the GDR, East Berlin was a showcase of socialism's strength, the capital of a workers' paradise. Throughout the divided city, whispers of change began to grow louder. People exchanged stories of hope and dreams of a united Berlin, where the wall would one day crumble and the city could breathe freely once more. Unknown to many, the seeds of transformation were already being sown, setting the stage for a historic moment that would reshape not only Berlin, but the world. In East Berlin, however, the weight of oppression stifled innovation and individualism. The government's attempts to project an image of prosperity often fell short, as shortages and economic stagnation took their toll. Despite the challenges, The people of East Berlin found ways to cope and resist, often through subtle acts of defiance and creativity. Music, literature, and underground art movements became vehicles for expressing dissent and imagining a different future. As the years progressed, the contrast between the two Berlins became more pronounced. West Berlin blossomed into a vibrant cultural mosaic, with cafes, theaters, and galleries buzzing with life and creativity. The city's cultural scene became a melting pot of ideas, where freedom of expression was not only allowed but celebrated. This spirit of openness and experimentation made West Berlin an attractive destination for artists and thinkers from around the world. In both parts of the city, the Berlin Wall loomed large, a stark symbol of division that cut through streets, neighborhoods, and even families. It was a constant reminder of the Cold War's tensions and the ideological chasm that separated East from West. Yet, despite the physical and ideological barriers, human connections endured. Stories of daring escapes and ingenious methods of crossing the wall became legendary, fueling hope and resilience among those trapped in the East. Education, employment, and travel were tightly controlled. Dissenters were labeled enemies of the state and either imprisoned or exiled. Yet, daily life went on. Children went to school, families celebrated holidays, and the state maintained a facade of stability. But beneath that calm surface was a deep yearning for freedom and a growing awareness that the system was rotting from within. In East Germany, underground art movements and secret literary circles thrived as individuals sought to preserve their heritage and express their longing for change. Meanwhile, families were often divided by the wall, with relatives on opposite sides maintaining tenuous connections through letters and rare visits. These personal stories of separation and longing added a human dimension to the political standoff, revealing the profound impact of the ideological divide on everyday lives. As the years passed, whispers of change began to grow louder. Movements for reform gained momentum, and the desire for freedom became palpable in the air. The propaganda war, once seemingly insurmountable, began to falter under the weight of its own contradictions and the relentless human spirit yearning for connection and unity. The wall, once a symbol of division, was destined to become a powerful testament to the resilience of hope and the inevitability of transformation. By the late 1970s, cracks were forming, not in the wall itself, but in the system behind it. East Germany's economy, heavily dependent on Soviet subsidies, began to stagnate. Factories lagged behind Western technology. Shortages of consumer goods became common. While the regime boasted of full employment, real productivity and innovation were collapsing. Meanwhile, in the West, a new generation was rising, one that had grown up with the wall as a fact of life, but also one that questioned whether détente was truly bringing change. The ideological war had shifted from confrontation to competition. Who could provide a better life, a better future, a better idea of freedom? Berlin remained at the crossroads, a living symbol of a divided world. Every tourist who stood at Checkpoint Charlie, every East German who risked their life to flee, and every soldier who guarded the wall was part of a global drama still far from its final act. By the end of the 1,970 seconds, The wall stood firm, but history was already moving beneath its foundations. In the Kremlin, new faces were rising. In Poland, a labor movement was awakening. In the Vatican, a Polish pope was preaching hope. And in Berlin, whispers of change began to echo through the concrete. The Cold War city was about to become the stage for its final and most dramatic transformation. As the 1980 seconds dawned, Berlin found itself at the heart of a rapidly shifting landscape. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Across the globe, the winds of change were gathering strength, and Berlin, ever the symbol of division, was poised to become the epicenter of a historic metamorphosis. In the East, the whispers of reform grew louder, carried by the voices of those who dared to dream of a different future. The rigid structures of the past began to tremble under the weight of growing dissent. Meanwhile, in the West, the call for unity and the promise of freedom resonated with increasing clarity. Cultural exchanges, once limited and carefully monitored, began to flourish. Artists, musicians, and thinkers from both sides of the wall found ways to communicate, their creative expressions serving as a bridge over the ideological chasm. The vibrant graffiti that adorned the wall's western face became a testament to the human spirit's indomitable desire for connection and expression. As the years passed, the pressure for change became impossible to ignore. It was a time of courage and conviction, where ordinary individuals became extraordinary heroes in the quest for a better tomorrow. The world watched with bated breath as the seemingly unyielding wall faced its greatest challenge yet, the collective will of a people yearning for freedom and unity. In this charged atmosphere, Berlin stood resilient, a city on the cusp of transformation. The stage was set for a new chapter, one that would redefine not just a city, but the very fabric of a divided world. By the dawn of the 1980 seconds, the Berlin Wall had stood for nearly 2 decades. Solid, cold, and seemingly eternal. Children born after 1961 had grown up knowing nothing else. For them, the wall was not a political symbol. It was simply a fact of life, the concrete edge of their world. But history, like pressure building behind a dam, was preparing to break through. The forces that would destroy the wall were not launched by tanks or bombs, but by ideas, by the unstoppable demand for change. In living rooms and cafes, whispers of reform and dreams of unity spread like wildfire, igniting hearts and minds across the divided city. The power of peaceful protest began to take shape as brave souls gathered in candlelit vigils, their flickering lights a testament to their hope for a brighter future. As the decade progressed, cracks began to appear in the seemingly impregnable facade of the Eastern Bloc. Leaders who once ruled with an iron fist found themselves facing a tide of change they could no longer ignore. The winds of glasnost and perestroika, blowing from the east, began to erode the foundations of an outdated system. In the summer of 1989, the world watched in awe as a series of events unfolded with breathtaking speed. The Hungarian government opened its borders, allowing East Germans to escape to the west, setting off a chain reaction. Thousands flocked to the checkpoints, yearning for freedom, their courage undeterred by the looming threat of repression. Then, on November 9th, the unthinkable happened. A miscommunication about the easing of travel restrictions led to an extraordinary moment. Crowds surged towards the wall, their chants of "Open the gate" growing louder with each passing minute. Faced with the overwhelming spirit of the people, the guards stood aside, and the barriers that had divided a city and the world came crashing down. In that moment, the Berlin Wall, once a stark symbol of division, became a relic of the past. Families reunited, strangers embraced, and a city began to heal. The fall of the wall was a triumph not just for Berlin, but for humanity, a testament to the power of peaceful revolution and the enduring strength of the human spirit. The 1972nd détente had brought a temporary calm between East and West. But by the early 1982s, that calm was collapsing. The Soviet Union, under Leonid Brezhnev, was aging and stagnant. Its empire stretched across Eastern Europe, but its economy was rotting from within. While the United States under Ronald Reagan entered a new era of confrontation, calling the Soviet Union an evil empire, Moscow was trapped in a cycle of military spending and political decay. In East Germany, leader Erich Honecker continued to boast of the GDR's success, claiming it was the most prosperous socialist state. Yet beneath the surface, reality was grim. Factories were outdated, shortages increasing, citizens demoralized. The Berlin Wall, once built to stop people from fleeing, had now become a prison for an entire system. The people living in the shadow of the wall clearly felt the difference between their daily lives and the government's propaganda. They longed for freedom and opportunity, things they could only glimpse through stories from the other side of the wall. Meanwhile, the movement for democracy was beginning to spread across Eastern Europe. In Poland, the Solidarity Trade Union emerged as a powerful force, challenging the communist government and demanding reform. These small waves of change gradually turned into large waves, carrying the hopes and determination of millions. In the final decade of the 20th century, the world witnessed irreversible transformations. The Berlin Wall, once a symbol of division, finally fell in 1989, ushering in a new era of peace and unity for Europe. These events not only marked the end of a period of conflict, but also heralded a new chapter full of potential and challenges in international relations. The first cracks appeared not in Berlin, but in Poland. In 1980, a shipyard electrician named Lech Wałęsa led a strike in Gdańsk, demanding independent labor unions and greater political freedom. Against all odds, the movement succeeded, forming the Solidarity Union, which soon grew to millions of members. For the first time in the communist bloc, a mass movement had openly challenged the ruling party and survived. The Kremlin was alarmed, but direct Soviet intervention, like in Hungary 1956, or Czechoslovakia 1968, no longer seemed viable. The world was changing, and the Soviet Union could no longer easily suppress rebellion without global backlash. Solidarity was crushed under martial law in 1981, but its spirit lived on, proving to all Eastern Europeans, including East Germans, that change was possible. People across Eastern Europe realized that their will could shake a seemingly unbreakable system. The idea of freedom and democracy began to spread like wildfire, igniting hope in places that seemed hopeless. In the following years, movements for democracy and reform continued to flourish, not only in Poland but also in Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and many other countries in the bloc. Peaceful protests, strikes, and public discussions gradually pushed back against the pressure from authoritarian governments, creating an unstoppable wave of change. By the late 1980s, the walls of dictatorship began to crumble, and with the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, a new era opened up for Europe. Nations that had once been behind the Iron Curtain now had the chance to rebuild their societies based on democratic and free values. In 1985, a new leader rose in Moscow, Mikhail Gorbachev, the youngest Soviet leader in decades. He recognized what his predecessors had refused to admit, that the Soviet system was crumbling. Gorbachev introduced two revolutionary policies. Perestroika, restructuring, aimed to reform the Soviet economy. Glasnost, openness, allowed freedom of expression and political transparency. For the first time, the Soviet Union permitted public criticism of the government. Across Eastern Europe, the message was clear. Moscow would no longer enforce control through fear. This change, though seemingly small, was an earthquake. The leaders of Eastern Europe, from Warsaw to Prague to East Berlin, suddenly realized that the iron hand that had once protected them was loosening its grip. Citizens, long accustomed to silence, began to voice their aspirations and grievances, fueling a surge of political activism. The winds of change swept across the region, inspiring reform movements and igniting a spirit of resilience among the people. In Poland, the Solidarity movement, led by Lech Wałęsa, gained momentum, challenging the communist regime and demanding democratic reforms. In Hungary, reform-minded leaders pushed for multi-party elections, setting the stage for a peaceful transition to democracy. Czechoslovakia witnessed the Velvet Revolution, a non-violent uprising that led to the end of communist rule and the election of Václav Havel as president. Meanwhile, in East Germany, the Berlin Wall, a symbol of division and oppression, became the focal point of widespread protests. The chants of "Wir sind das Volk," "We are the people," echoed through the streets, culminating in the historic fall of the wall in November 1989. This monumental event marked not only the reunification of Germany, but also the symbolic end of the Cold War. Gorbachev's policies had inadvertently set off a domino effect, with one nation after another breaking free from the shackles of Soviet influence. The landscape of Europe was transforming rapidly, and by the early 1992s, the Soviet Union itself faced an inevitable dissolution. In this new era, the world witnessed the emergence of independent states and the promise of a future shaped by democracy and cooperation. Gorbachev, though a controversial figure, left a legacy of change that altered the course of history and redefined the geopolitical landscape. But Erich Honecker, the aging East German leader, refused to follow Gorbachev's path. He saw glasnost and perestroika as dangerous infections that could undermine socialist discipline. Under his rule, censorship remained strict. Surveillance continued, and the Berlin Wall stood as strong as ever. While Gorbachev was being celebrated across the world as a reformer, Honecker doubled down on repression. East Germany became an island of rigidity in a sea of reform. By the late 1982, the contrast between the two Germanys had become unbearable. West Berlin glowed with neon lights, Western brands, and consumer freedom. East Berlin was gray, quiet, and suffocating. Even loyal party members began to question how long their system could survive. The air was thick with discontent, and whispers of change began to ripple through the streets of East Berlin. People gathered in small, clandestine groups, sharing stories of their counterparts in the West, dreaming of a life where freedom wasn't a distant fantasy. Despite the regime's efforts to quell dissent, the winds of change were impossible to ignore. Young people, brimming with hope and a desire for a brighter future, became the torchbearers of a nascent revolution. They organized peaceful protests, demanding reform and the dismantling of the barriers that kept them isolated from the rest of the world. As the pressure mounted, Honecker's grip on power began to weaken. His refusal to adapt to the changing times increasingly isolated him, even from his closest allies. The world watched with bated breath, sensing that the Iron Curtain that had long divided Europe might finally be lifting. In the autumn of 1989, the unthinkable happened. The Berlin Wall, a symbol of division and oppression, was breached. The jubilant cries of freedom echoed through the city as East and West Germans embraced. United at last, the fall of the wall signaled a new era, one where the dreams of unity and democracy could flourish, transcending the shadows of the past. In 1987, U.S. President Ronald Reagan visited Berlin. Standing in front of the Brandenburg Gate, he delivered one of the most iconic speeches of the Cold War. His words echoed across the divided city and deep into history. "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." The East German government dismissed it as Western propaganda, but to millions listening, both East and West, those words struck a chord. The wall, once seen as permanent, suddenly seemed vulnerable again. Reagan's speech symbolized a moral turning point. It reminded the world that the wall was not destiny. It was a choice, and choices could change. Those powerful words fueled hope and encouraged people on both sides of the wall to dream of a different future, one without division. Reagan's words became a symbol of determination and resolve, a reminder that power lies not only in the hands of leaders, but also in the words and will of the people. Over time, the Berlin Wall fell, opening a new chapter in world history. This event proved that words could bring about significant change, turning the seemingly impossible into reality. In our era, as the world continues to face many challenges, the power of words remains a potent tool for connection, inspiration, and creating positive change. By 1988, the winds of change were sweeping through Eastern Europe. In Hungary, reformers began dismantling border fences with Austria. In Poland, solidarity returned to the political stage. In the Soviet Union itself, Gorbachev spoke openly of human rights and democracy. East Germany tried to ignore these changes, but the truth could not be hidden. Western television broadcasts reached millions of East Germans every night, showing news of protests, reforms, and a world moving forward. While they remained trapped behind the wall, the sense of frustration was building. Churches became centers of quiet resistance where citizens gathered to pray, discuss, and dream of freedom. What began as whispers soon turned into chants. By the autumn of 1989, those chants had grown into a powerful chorus that could no longer be silenced. The Monday demonstrations in Leipzig gathered momentum, with thousands of people taking to the streets, courageously demanding change. "We are the people," they cried, a simple yet profound assertion of their collective will. The government, initially resistant, was caught off guard by the sheer scale of the movement. As each week passed, the numbers swelled, and the palpable sense of hope spread through the cities and towns of East Germany. The authorities, unable to contain the tide of human spirit, found their once unyielding grip beginning to falter. On the 9th of November 1989, an unexpected announcement was made that would change the course of history. A government spokesperson, in a moment of confusion and miscommunication, declared that the border was open. Within hours, jubilant crowds surged towards the Berlin Wall, scaling it with laughter and tears. Families and friends, long separated, embraced in moments of ecstatic reunion. It was a night of celebration and liberation, as the world watched in awe. The fall of the Berlin Wall became a symbol of a new era, where walls could no longer divide the hopes and dreams of humanity. The events of 1989 reminded the world that change, often sparked by the quiet courage of ordinary people, is always possible. In 1989, the unthinkable began to unfold. Throughout the spring and summer, mass demonstrations erupted across Eastern Europe. In Poland, the first semi-free elections brought solidarity into government, the first non-communist leadership in the bloc. In Hungary, the border with Austria was officially opened in August, creating a loophole in the Iron Curtain. Thousands of East Germans fled there, crossing freely into the West. The East German regime tried to stop them, but every new barrier only made the people more determined. When Honecker demanded that the borders be closed, even his own officials hesitated. The tide of history was against him. By October, as Gorbachev visited East Berlin to celebrate the GDR's 40th anniversary, crowds filled the streets shouting, "Gorby! Gorby!" calling for reform. Gorbachev warned Honecker that life punishes those who delay. Within days, Honecker was forced to resign. His successor, Egon Krenz, promised change, but it was already too late. The spirit of revolution was unstoppable. In Leipzig, the Monday demonstrations grew larger and more defiant, as hundreds of thousands of citizens marched, demanding freedom and democracy. The chants of "We are the people" echoed through the city, a powerful testament to their resolve. By November, the pressure had reached a boiling point. On the night of the 9th of November, 1989, a miscommunication during a press conference led to the unexpected announcement that East Germans could cross the border freely. People rushed to the Berlin Wall, unsure if this was truly the moment they had been waiting for. As the evening unfolded, border guards, overwhelmed and uncertain, eventually opened the gates. Jubilant crowds surged through, climbing on top of the wall, celebrating with tears, laughter, and embraces. Families were reunited, and strangers became friends in the euphoria of newfound freedom. The fall of the Berlin Wall became a symbol of hope and the end of an era. It marked not only the collapse of a physical barrier, but also the beginning of a new chapter for Europe and the world. The echoes of those historic days continue to inspire, a reminder of the power of the human spirit and the universal desire for liberty. The Stasi, once all-powerful, now watched helplessly as the revolution unfolded, not with violence, but with chants and candles. The peaceful demonstrations illuminated city streets, filling them with hope and determination. Each Monday evening, the flickering light of countless candles mirrored the hearts of those brave individuals who dared to dream of a future free from oppression. Families, friends, and strangers alike marched side by side, their unity a powerful testament to the strength of the human spirit. The government, caught off guard by the sheer scale and resolve of the populace, found its iron grip slipping. Conversations that once took place in hushed whispers behind closed doors now resonated openly, echoing through the public squares. The walls that had divided not just cities, but lives, began to crumble under the weight of this collective will for change. As autumn days shortened and the chill of winter approached, the resolve of the demonstrators only solidified. The world watched in awe as history unfolded, a vivid reminder that even the most fortified regimes cannot withstand the power of a unified voice demanding justice and freedom. In the end, it was not the might of arms, but the courage of the people that heralded a new dawn. Then came the night that changed everything. On the evening of November 9th, 1989, East German officials held a confusing press conference. A spokesperson, Günther Schabowski, was asked when new travel regulations allowing East Germans to visit the West would take effect. Unprepared, he glanced at his notes and casually replied, "As far as I know, effective immediately, without delay." Within minutes, the news spread like wildfire. Thousands of East Berliners rushed to border crossings, demanding to be let through. Confused guards called their superiors, but no clear orders came. Faced with an overwhelming crowd, one commander finally gave the historic command, "Open the gate." At 10:45 p.m., the barriers at Bornholmer Strasse were lifted. People surged across, cheering, crying, hugging strangers. West Berliners climbed onto the wall to greet them, offering champagne, flowers, and music. Television cameras broadcast the scene worldwide. Tears, laughter, hammers chipping away at concrete. The Berlin Wall, symbol of division and oppression, had fallen, not through war or conquest, but through the will of ordinary people, united in their desire for freedom and change. This monumental event marked the beginning of the end for the Cold War and paved the way for the reunification of Germany. The concrete barrier that had separated families and friends for nearly 3 decades was transformed into a powerful reminder of human resilience and the power of collective action. In the days and weeks that followed, people from both East and West Berlin continued to gather at the wall, celebrating and reclaiming their city. Artists and activists painted murals on the remaining sections, turning what once was a symbol of division into a canvas for hope and unity. The fall of the Berlin Wall also ignited a wave of change across Eastern Europe, inspiring movements for freedom and democracy in other countries. It was a testament to the idea that when people stand together, even the mightiest of barriers can be brought down. For those who lived through that night, the memories remain vivid, a testament to the courage and determination of individuals who dared to dream of a better future. Today, the Berlin Wall stands as a historical monument, a reminder of the past, and a celebration of the triumph of the human spirit. In the days that followed, millions crossed freely between East and West. Families reunited after decades. Streets once divided were filled with music and celebration. Within weeks, the government of East Germany collapsed completely. The fall of the wall became the first domino in the collapse of the entire Eastern Bloc. By 1991, the Soviet Union itself ceased to exist. The Cold War, which had shaped the world for nearly half a century, was finally over. The world watched in awe as new chapters of history were written. The air was filled with a renewed sense of hope and the promise of a future unburdened by the shadows of conflict. As the East and West began to mend the rifts that had long separated them, an era of unprecedented cooperation and dialogue emerged. Cultural exchanges flourished, economic partnerships blossomed, and the idea of a united Europe gained momentum, fostering a spirit of unity that transcended old boundaries. People from all walks of life embraced the opportunity to learn from one another, celebrating their shared humanity while cherishing their unique identities. The fall of the Iron Curtain was not just a geopolitical shift, it was a profound reminder of the power of resilience and the human spirit's unyielding quest for freedom and peace. The echoes of those transformative days continue to resonate, reminding us that even the most formidable walls can crumble when faced with the collective will for change and the enduring belief in a better tomorrow. The Berlin Wall stood for 28 years. It divided a city, a nation, and a world, but it could not divide the human spirit. Its fall marked not only the end of an era, but the triumph of freedom over fear. It reminded the world that no system built on repression can last forever, that walls may stand for a time, but ideas can pass through them like light through cracks. Even today, fragments of the wall remain silent monuments to the courage of those who refuse to accept that the world must stay divided. The Berlin Wall began as a line of barbed wire in the night and ended as rubble beneath the feet of a jubilant crowd. It stood for 10,316 days, and in a single night it vanished. But its legacy remains, a reminder that freedom is never given, it is claimed. It serves as a poignant reminder of the resilience and determination of people yearning for a better future. The wall's history is a testament to the power of unity and hope, underscoring the truth that profound changes often begin with the courage of individuals who dare to dream. The stories of those who lived through that time are tales of bravery and sacrifice, of families separated but never giving up hope for reunion. The graffiti that once adorned its surface spoke volumes, transforming cold concrete into a canvas of defiance and aspiration. Today, as visitors walk along the remnants of the Berlin Wall, they are reminded of the importance of vigilance in protecting the freedoms hard won by past generations. It stands as a call to action for all who see it, to never take liberty for granted and to strive for a world where walls of division are replaced by bridges of understanding and compassion. And the night the Berlin Wall fell was not the end of a story. It was the start of another one, far more complicated. Because when the concrete cracked and families embraced, a new challenge emerged. How do you stitch together two countries, two economies, and two identities that had lived apart for nearly half a century? Freedom had come suddenly, almost violently. But rebuilding? That would take patience, compromise, and time. And time, as history often shows, is never kind. It was a time of hope and uncertainty, where the air was thick with both celebration and apprehension. The streets of Berlin were alive with the footsteps of those who had long dreamed of this moment. Yet beneath the surface lay a complex web of emotions and questions. Leaders from both sides faced the daunting task of bridging the gap between East and West, not just in terms of politics and economics, but in the hearts and minds of the people. The scars of division ran deep, and healing them required more than just policies. It required understanding, empathy, and a shared vision for the future. Cultural integration became a focal point as artists, musicians, and writers from both sides sought to create a new, unified narrative. Public spaces buzzed with creativity, serving as both a canvas and a battleground where old prejudices were challenged and new identities forged. Economically, the hurdles were equally formidable. The disparity between the two economies meant that reintegration was a complex puzzle, requiring innovative solutions and bold reforms. Industries had to be modernized, jobs created, and infrastructure rebuilt to support the burgeoning aspirations of a unified populace. Yet, despite the challenges, the spirit of resilience was palpable. Communities came together, sharing stories, laughter, and tears, laying the groundwork for a society that would eventually thrive on its diversity rather than be divided by it. Looking back, the fall of the Berlin Wall was not just the collapse of a physical barrier, it was the dismantling of a psychological one. It marked the beginning of a journey toward unity, a testament to the human spirit's capacity for renewal and growth. As the years passed, Germany transformed, not through the erasure of its past, but through the embrace of its complex and multifaceted history, emerging stronger and more united than ever before. When the wall crumbled, the sound of that collapse echoed across Europe. In Warsaw, Budapest, Prague, and Bucharest, people watched the images of Berliners dancing on the wall, crying, laughing, breaking bricks with their bare hands, and they realized if it could happen there, it could happen here. Within months, communist regimes that had ruled for decades fell one by one like dominoes. Poland legalized the Solidarity movement. Hungary opened its borders to Austria, the first hole in the Iron Curtain. In Czechoslovakia, students marched peacefully in what became the Velvet Revolution, ending 4 decades of dictatorship without a single shot. Even in Romania, where violence erupted, the once untouchable Nicolae Ceausescu faced the rage of his own people. On Christmas Day 1989, he and his wife were executed after a brief trial broadcast to the nation. For the first time in living memory, an entire region was breathing free air. In Moscow, Mikhail Gorbachev watched events spiral beyond his control. His reforms, glasnost and perestroika, had been meant to save the Soviet system, not destroy it. But by loosening the iron grip, he had set forces in motion that no leader could stop. To the surprise of the world, the Soviet tanks stayed in their barracks. No invasion, no bloodbath, just silence, the quiet death of an empire's control. And at the center of it all stood Germany. Berlin, once a symbol of Cold War division, suddenly became the heartbeat of a new Europe. But the fall of the wall raised the biggest question of all. Would Germany, the land once blamed for 2 world wars, be trusted to rise again? Can Germany once again become a leading force, but this time not as a threat, but as a peaceful partner? These questions resonate not only in the hearts of Germans, but also across Europe and the world. The people of Berlin began their work with a determination to build a new future. The remnants of the wall quickly turned into symbols of hope and reunification. Each shattered brick became a keepsake carrying the story of a bygone era and the dreams of a new age. Throughout Germany, a new spirit of solidarity emerged. People from both East and West came together to rebuild the country with a determination to overcome differences and build a shared future. Former enemies now became allies, working together to ensure that the mistakes of the past would never be repeated. The world watched Germany's transformation, hoping that lessons from the past would guide them towards a future of peace and prosperity. It was a moment of transition when history was rewritten, not with violence, but with reconciliation and hope. In Bonn, the capital of West Germany, Chancellor Helmut Kohl was not celebrating. He was calculating. Kohl knew history moved fast, and if Germany didn't move faster, someone else would decide its fate. On the 28th of November, 1989, just weeks after the wall fell, he announced a 10-point plan for gradual reunification. Step by step, he would turn euphoria into political reality. But the world wasn't ready. In London, Margaret Thatcher reportedly told her advisors, "We beat the Germans twice, and now they're back." She feared a united Germany could dominate Europe once more. In Paris, François Mitterrand was equally nervous. France had built its post-war identity around balancing Germany's power. A reunified Germany could shift that balance forever. Even in Moscow, Gorbachev hesitated. The Soviet Union still had nearly 380,000 troops stationed in East Germany. Would they leave peacefully? Would NATO expand eastward? Would the Cold War truly end, or just change shape? Helmut Kohl answered not with weapons, but with diplomacy. The key was the 2+4 talks, the 2 Germanys plus the 4 occupying powers of World War II, the US, UK, France, and the Soviet Union. These talks, held in 1990, were tense, delicate, and historic. They would determine not just German unity, but the future map of Europe. In the end, Kohl secured what many thought impossible. Germany would reunify peacefully. Its borders with Poland would be guaranteed, and though unified, it would remain firmly anchored in NATO, a signal that this new Germany would not threaten, but stabilize Europe. Meanwhile, inside East Germany, change moved at breathtaking speed. Communist leaders resigned. The Stasi, the dreaded secret police, was disbanded. And in July 1990, the West German Deutsche Mark became the official currency of the East. Overnight, East Germans could buy Western goods, travel freely, and dream without permission. Finally, on the 3rd of October 1990, at midnight, fireworks lit the sky over Berlin. The two Germanys, divided for 45 years, became one. The crowd sang the national anthem through tears. For a brief, magical moment, the nation exhaled. But beneath the music and lights lay a harsh reality. Freedom was priceless, but reunification would not be free. The economic disparities between the East and West were vast, and bridging them would require immense effort and resources. Factories in the East were outdated, unemployment soared, and the once state-controlled industries struggled to compete in a market economy. The infrastructure needed significant investment to meet the standards that had been developed in the West over decades. Socially, the transition was just as challenging. East Germans were suddenly thrust into a new world of choice and consumerism, one that was both exhilarating and overwhelming. The cultural differences, shaped by years of separation, were pronounced. People had to adapt to a new political system, new laws, and a new way of life. The psychological impact of reunification, of finding a common identity, was a journey that would take years. Yet, amid these challenges, there was a resilient spirit of hope and determination. Communities came together, driven by the belief that a unified Germany could create a brighter future for all its citizens. Investments in education and innovation began to close the gap, and the nation worked tirelessly to integrate and uplift the East. As the years passed, Germany emerged as a stronger, more cohesive country. The lessons of reunification became a testament to the power of diplomacy, cooperation, and the shared values of democracy and freedom. The story of Germany's reunification is not just a narrative of overcoming division. It is a reminder of the human capacity to heal and build anew, even after decades of separation. East Germany joined West Germany not as an equal partner, but as a patient in need of healing. Its economy was crippled. Its factories are obsolete. Its people are exhausted. And the medicine, capitalism, was strong, sometimes too strong to bear. Within months, unemployment in the East surged. The Treuhandanstalt, the agency created to privatize East German state industries, sold or shut down thousands of enterprises. Entire industries, steel, coal, shipbuilding, vanished overnight. In cities like Halle and Rostock, workers who once built for the state now queued for welfare checks. For many, freedom began to feel like a betrayal. Cultural shock set in. The Osses, Easterners, felt colonized. The Wesses, Westerners, felt burdened. Old stereotypes resurfaced. The East as lazy, the West as arrogant. In one bitter joke, East Germans said, "We expected justice, but we got capitalism instead." And yet, amid frustration, there was progress. Billions of Deutsche Marks poured into rebuilding infrastructure, roads, railways, hospitals, and schools. The scars of socialism slowly gave way to glass buildings, new businesses, and bustling streets. A generation of young Easterners raised under propaganda, began traveling, studying, and working freely, something their parents could only dream of. Chancellor Kohl had promised blossoming landscapes. They were coming, just not fast enough for everyone. But even as Germany wrestled with internal division, the world around it was shifting again. The Cold War's end brought new opportunities and challenges on a global scale. The European Union was expanding, and Germany found itself at the heart of a burgeoning alliance, tasked with playing a pivotal role in shaping a new Europe. The Maastricht Treaty, signed in 1992, laid the groundwork for the euro, fostering economic integration, which Germany championed. Meanwhile, in the Balkans, conflict was brewing. The disintegration of Yugoslavia led to war, and Europe was once again reminded of the fragility of peace. Germany, grappling with its own reunification, was called upon to take a stand, to aid in peacekeeping efforts, and to support humanitarian causes. The shadows of past conflicts loomed large, but Germany was determined to be a force for stability and unity. Internally, the social fabric of Germany was evolving. As Easterners and Westerners navigated their new reality, cultural exchanges flourished. Art, music, and literature became powerful tools of expression and healing, bridging divides and fostering a shared identity. Education reform was underway, with a focus on innovation and inclusivity. Universities welcomed a diverse student body, eager to learn and contribute to a modern, unified Germany. The nation was slowly finding its footing, learning from its past, and looking forward to a future where its people, from both sides of the former wall, could thrive together. The world had changed beyond recognition. The year was 1991, and Berlin, a city that had once been the epicenter of global division, now stood at the crossroads of a new era. 2 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall, the unthinkable occurred. The Soviet Union, the very symbol of the Cold War, dissolved into thin air. Republic by republic, nations like Ukraine, Belarus, and the Baltic states severed their ties to Moscow and declared their independence. It was a moment of profound shift, a seismic event in history, when the red flag of communism was lowered from the Kremlin for the very last time. And with that, the Cold War, which had cast its long shadow over Europe for nearly half a century, officially ended. For Germany, this was nothing short of a miracle. In the aftermath of war, division, and decades of suspicion, Germany had endured more than its fair share of history's worst trials. But now, the country was no longer the front line of ideological warfare. No longer would Berlin be a city torn between two superpowers, its very streets echoing with the tensions of a divided world. Now, Germany stood proudly as the heart of a new Europe, unified, sovereign, and at peace with its past. Berlin, once a city cut in half by walls and barbed wire, reclaimed its rightful place as the capital of Germany. The Bundestag, Germany's parliament, returned to the historic Reichstag, a building with its own painful scars from the past. The Reichstag had seen wars, revolutions, and partitions, but in the early 1992s, it was reborn. The glass dome, now redesigned by the architect Norman Foster, symbolized a new transparency in German democracy. Where once the building had been obscured by the shadows of secrecy and division, now visitors could look down upon the leaders of the nation, a metaphor made of steel and light, an embodiment of a new era where the people held the power, not just in words but in deeds. The transformation of Berlin was not isolated. It echoed across the entire continent. The European community, a political and economic union forged in the ashes of war, was steadily evolving into something far greater. In 1992, the Maastricht Treaty came into effect, officially creating the European Union, EU, and expanding its influence across Europe. For Germany, this was a monumental moment, one that reflected not just a reconciliation with its past, but a commitment to a new future. Germany, once the nation that had torn Europe apart, was now the driving force behind its unity. It played a pivotal role in pushing for deeper integration, leading efforts to form a common currency, the euro. A nation that had been isolated by walls and division was now laying the groundwork for a united Europe. However, as is often the case with great change, the road ahead was not without its hurdles. The unity that Germany and the rest of Europe had worked toward carried risks of its own. NATO, the military alliance formed after World War II to prevent further conflict, expanded eastward in 1999, admitting countries like Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic. For Russia, this was a deep humiliation, a painful reminder of its lost power and influence over Eastern Europe. The old wounds of the Cold War were not easily healed, and the seeds of future tensions were quietly sown in those years. Tensions that would emerge more prominently in the 21st century. Inside Germany, the challenges of reunification were profound. The economic gap between East and West remained glaringly wide. The East, once ruled by a socialist regime, was left with a crumbling economy, outdated infrastructure, and little else to sustain it. The West, by contrast, had long been the economic powerhouse of Europe. Integrating the two halves of the country would require immense effort. The price tag for reunification was staggering, nearly 2 trillion euros, a sum that Germany would spend over the next 3 decades. Yet, despite the enormous costs and obstacles, Germany stood tall. By the late 1992, the country had transformed itself. A democracy that had been scarred by its past now stood as a model of resilience and progress, a respected voice in global affairs. As Germany entered the new millennium, its position in Europe and the world was clearer than ever. On the 9th of November 1999, the 10th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall, German President Johannes Rau addressed the nation. He said, "The wall is gone, but the lessons remain. Freedom must be defended, not once, but every day." His words were not just a reflection of the past. They were a call to action for the future. The world, still reeling from the twists and turns of the 20th century, was watching Germany. They had seen the nation rise from the ashes of war and division, and now they looked to it for leadership in a world that was still finding its way. Germany's voice mattered again. No longer a symbol of division, Germany had become a beacon of hope for Europe and the world. It had embraced its role as a leader in the European Union, pushing for policies that would foster peace, stability, and prosperity across the continent. And Germany wasn't just a political leader, it was a cultural force. Its industries flourished, leading innovations in technology, engineering, and renewable energy. The arts and cultural movements flourished as well, with Berlin itself becoming a vibrant hub for artists, musicians, and thinkers from all over the globe. The city, once a symbol of ideological conflict, was now a canvas for creativity and expression. It was a city reborn, a reflection of the new Germany. But, as with any major transformation, the road was far from smooth. The integration of East and West posed significant challenges, especially in the economic realm. The disparities between the eastern and western parts of the country remained a deeply entrenched issue. The East, which had been under the yoke of socialism for decades, had little to offer in terms of infrastructure or industry. It would take years of investment, innovation, and hard work to bring the region up to speed. As the 21st century began, the country found itself grappling with a rapidly changing global landscape. The effects of globalization and the rise of the internet were beginning to reshape economies, while political tensions continued to simmer in other parts of the world. In 2008, the global financial crisis hit, shaking economies worldwide. Germany, however, weathered the storm better than many. Its strong social market economy, built on a foundation of stability and foresight, allowed it to emerge from the crisis more resilient than before. Unlike many other nations, Germany's fiscal policies and robust industrial base helped the country recover faster, reaffirming its position as Europe's leading economic power. Germany's influence was not just economic, it was moral. As the world faced new challenges such as climate change, refugee crises, and geopolitical instability, Germany took on a leadership role in international diplomacy. It championed humanitarian efforts, advocated for climate action, and became a steadfast advocate for human rights. Germany was now seen as a country that had learned from its past mistakes, a nation that sought to heal its wounds and lead the world with compassion and responsibility. And then there was Berlin, a city that had once been divided by ideology, culture, and politics. In the years after the wall fell, Berlin became a symbol of unity and hope. The streets that had been once marked by division were now filled with music, laughter, and life. Berlin's festivals, art exhibitions, and street performances were a celebration of everything the city had become diverse, dynamic, and unified. The cultural scene flourished, drawing visitors from all over the world. From the East Side Gallery, where remnants of the wall were now covered in vibrant murals, to the bustling cafes and shops that lined the streets, Berlin became a living testament to the power of resilience, unity, and creativity. But while the city pulsed with energy, the challenges were far from over. The integration of East and West continued to be a slow and difficult process. The economic gap between the two regions remained a source of tension. The youth of the East, many of whom had grown up under the harsh realities of the socialist regime, struggled to find their place in the new world of capitalism and opportunity. In the West, there were still old wounds to heal. The reunification of Germany wasn't just about building bridges between two physical regions. It was about mending a nation's soul. Yet, Despite these challenges, Germany emerged stronger. By the time the 21st century was well underway, Germany had not only integrated its past, it had embraced it. It had become a country defined not by its history of division, but by its journey toward reconciliation. The lessons of the Berlin Wall, both the physical structure and the ideological divide it represented, had shaped a nation that was now committed to promoting peace, prosperity, and unity. As Germany continued to forge its place in the world, the country remained a symbol of what could be accomplished when a nation comes together, when people rise above division and fear, and when they decide to build a future based on shared values. Germany had been broken, fractured by war, divided by ideology, but through determination, courage, and a relentless pursuit of unity, it became a model for the world. The echoes of the Berlin Wall may still be felt in the heart of Europe, but the message is clear. No wall, no matter how high or how long it stands, is too great to break the spirit of a people determined to reunite. As Germany marched into the new millennium, it did so not just as a country reborn, but as a beacon of hope for a new Europe. A Europe built on understanding, cooperation, and a shared vision for the future. The wall that never fully fell. History did not stop when the Berlin Wall came down. In many ways, it simply changed form. 2 decades later, new walls began rising, not of concrete, but of culture, economy, and memory. In Germany itself, the Ossi-Wessi divide never fully disappeared. Even in the 2010 seconds, unemployment remained higher in the East, and voting patterns diverged sharply. Right-wing populism found fertile ground in regions that once stood behind the Iron Curtain. The message was clear. Walls may fall quickly, but divisions of the mind take generations to erase. Yet, for all its scars, reunification transformed Germany into Europe's moral compass. It led in peacekeeping, diplomacy, and humanitarian relief. It became a champion of unity in a time of growing nationalism. In 2015, when refugees poured into Europe from Syria and beyond, Chancellor Angela Merkel, an East German herself, declared, "Wir schaffen das. We can do this." Her words reflected not arrogance, but a hard-earned belief that walls solve nothing. Globally, the fall of the Berlin Wall remains one of the defining moments of the 20th century, a victory not of armies, but of people. It symbolized the triumph of courage over control, of truth over propaganda, and it reminded the world that even the mightiest barriers can crumble when humanity chooses hope over fear. But the legacy also carries warnings. The Cold War's end did not end history's conflicts. It simply redrew them. From Ukraine to the Middle East, new lines are drawn, new walls imagined. The question remains, have we truly learned from Berlin? As we reflect on the lessons of the past, it becomes evident that the challenges of unification and division are ever present. The metaphorical walls we erect today, be they digital, ideological, or geopolitical, require the same courage and determination to dismantle as the physical walls of yesterday. In the digital age, the internet has become both a bridge and a barrier. While it connects people across continents, it also creates echo chambers that reinforce biases and deepen divides. The challenge is to use technology as a tool for understanding, rather than division. Education, too, plays a crucial role in breaking down barriers. By fostering inclusivity and empathy from a young age, we can cultivate a generation that values dialogue over discord. Schools and communities must work in tandem to promote cross-cultural understanding and collaboration. As individuals, we each have a role to play. Small acts of kindness, open-minded dialogue, and the willingness to listen can build bridges where walls once stood. It is through these efforts that we can hope to create a world where differences are celebrated rather than feared. Ultimately, the story of the Berlin Wall is a reminder that progress is a continuous journey. Each generation must choose whether to build walls or tear them down. As we move forward, let us choose to be architects of unity, crafting a future that honors the lessons of the past while embracing the possibilities of a more connected world. 30 years after that night in November 1989, Berlin stands transformed. Where machine guns once guarded, tourists now take selfies. Where families were once torn apart, lovers stroll hand in hand along the East Side Gallery, tracing murals painted on fragments of the wall that once divided them. The wall is gone, and yet, in a sense, it's everywhere. Every time nations close their borders, every time fear outweighs understanding, every time freedom is taken for granted, the story of Berlin is not just about Germany. It's about all of us. It's about how fragile freedom is, and how powerful people can be when they refuse to live behind walls. The Berlin Wall fell not because of an army, but because ordinary men and women, teachers, workers, mothers, and students believed that history could change if they demanded it. And they were right. The wall fell because humanity decided it should, and that, perhaps, is the greatest legacy of all. It serves as a reminder that walls, whether physical or metaphorical, are not insurmountable. They are built by human hands and minds, and can be dismantled the same way. The echoes of that broken wall resonate today in the struggles for justice, equality, and unity across the globe. As we look to the future, may the lessons learned from Berlin inspire courage and hope. Let us remember that change is possible, that voices raised in unison can alter the course of history, and that the human spirit is resilient enough to overcome even the most daunting obstacles. In commemorating the fall of the Berlin Wall, we celebrate not just a moment in time, but a testament to the enduring power of humanity to shape its own destiny. Let us continue to strive for a world where walls are unnecessary, where understanding triumphs over fear, and where freedom is cherished and protected for all. As we reflect on this pivotal event, we are reminded of the countless individuals whose courage and resilience played a crucial role in dismantling barriers, both physical and ideological. Their stories inspire us to remain vigilant and proactive in our pursuit of peace and unity. In a world that often seems divided, it is our shared responsibility to foster dialogue, promote mutual respect, and build bridges of connection. Together, let us honor the past by creating a future that embodies the values of compassion, equality, and hope for generations to come. And there you have it, the incredible story of the Berlin Wall, a physical and ideological barrier that once divided families, cities, and even nations. But in the end, It was the power of hope, courage, and the collective will of the people that brought it down. The fall of the Berlin Wall didn't just mark the reunification of Germany. It was a symbol for the world that even the most insurmountable divisions can be overcome when people stand together for freedom and unity. If you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to like this video and share it with others who might find this story just as inspiring. Comment below and let us know. What do you think is the biggest lesson we can learn from the fall of the Berlin Wall? How do we apply it to today's world? We love hearing your thoughts and reflections. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to our channel and click the bell icon so you never miss out on more fascinating historical stories. By subscribing, you're joining a community of history lovers who are passionate about learning, sharing, and reflecting on the events that shaped our world. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.